So there is a problem with modern day intellectuals. And these are philosophers, they're physicists, they're scientists, they're psychologists. And the problem that I am finding is that their empirical style of looking at the universe or viewing reality robs humanity of meaning. I can thoroughly explain this and enlighten each and every individual that can get to the end of this video. Modern intellectuals suffer from this absolute need to be correct.
Intellectually, one of the things that's absolutely clear to me when you look at the biology of behavior, human behavior, is there's no free will.
Scientists are having people fall down pitfalls of deep existential dread and anxiety, and maybe that's not what they're trying to do, but that is what's happening. People are interacting with this content and then feeling that they have no meaning. They are feeling like everything around them in this big meat grinder of reality is only there to destroy them. And in the end, this suffering is fundamentally pointless because scientists are there to try and get some control over the reins of reality. And what they're all doing is they're throwing up their hands and saying that if I don't have any fundamental control over reality, you don't either. And because of this, all of it's meaningless. You don't have an ego, you don't have any free will, and nothing matters. And the trouble is that now people are too afraid to speak out and say that they believe in something deeper to their existence because it has become taboo to do so. And when you claim that you believe something deeper than Newtonian physics, all of a sudden you're a lunatic and it is taboo to speak of such things. So we're going to start with a koan, and a koan is a mind-bending puzzle essentially. And this mind-bending puzzle is designed to get you to a state called satori. And satori is a temporary moment of an understanding of not understanding. Okay, and this is supposed to be an example of the deeper richness of our reality. Most people will claim that they exist within their own brain. And when we zoom in on the brain, we see approximately 86 billion neurons. And each neuron has the potential to connect with over 1,000 other neurons. And if we zoom in again, we see an enormous highway of dendrites. Neurons communicate with each other by sending chemicals called neurotransmitters across a tiny space called a synapse. Between the axons and the dendrites of nearby neurons, these chemicals freely float and lock into other axons and change action potentials of other neurons. So the question here becomes, where are you in the middle of all that? Where are we in the middle of all that? Give yourself a moment to ponder on that. So the problem that we get into as we try to answer this koan is that we have to absolve ourselves of an idea of you or me, because all we see upon inspection is the interconnectedness of many different free agents. And these many different free agents interconnecting together leads us to the rushed assumption that everything we experience is simply emergent and illusory. But the problem is that consciousness is ultimately unknowable, and because it is unknowable, people try to convince each other that it is an illusion or a strictly emergent phenomenon. Everybody is saying there's a you. We think we exist. We claim that we exist. You and I sitting here having all these experiences, we claim we exist. But if we just look at everything through the pure, cold, empirical eye of science, you don't exist at all. You're just an illusion. You are a collective, and a collective that can be built in many different ways, right? However, we know without knowing, and this is precisely where the satori comes in, that we are we are some sort of unity, and we have experiences that cannot be explained or justified by science because we are limited by the very system that we are in, because we are part of that system. So a good example of this is a man named Kurt Godel. And Godel was a brilliant mathematician who made groundbreaking discoveries in the field of logic and mathematics. And his most famous contribution is Godel's Incompleteness theorem, which showed that there are inherent limits to what we can prove within formal systems of mathematics. But to put this simply, any agent that's within a system cannot fully understand the system it is in because it is fundamentally made up of that very system. Even if you can determine the causality within the system by chaining what comes forward and what came before, what that system is made up of remains fundamentally unknowable.
What he shows is if you trust this algorithm for proving mathematical things, then you can see by the way it's constructed that it's true. But you can also see by the way it's constructed that it cannot be proved by this procedure. Now, this was amazing to me because it tells me that, okay, you cannot formalize your understanding in a scheme which you could put on a computer. You see, this statement which Godel comes up with is something you can see on the basis of the same understanding that allows you to trust the rules, that it's true, but that it's not actually derivable by the rules.
Even if you were looking at the system as a cold calculation, everything that exists within the matrix is just ones and zeros. Fundamentally, we have a phenomenon that goes on where things change state. A perfect example of this would be taking a piece of wood and carving out a structure from the wood. Now, that wood is fundamentally the same. It's always ones and zeros, but how these ones and zeros are put together have now fundamentally changed form. It holds a memory, and to hold this memory, it exchanges experience. It exchanges parts of its binary code, and it is the changing of this code which is fundamentally ununderstandable. It is experience itself which is the divine. It is that which we can never fathom. So we're going to let Julia Mossbridge explain this panpsychism just a little bit better than I can. Julia Mossbridge is a visiting scholar at Northwestern University. Her research primarily involves understanding how time is perceived by our unconscious and conscious minds, and is secondarily related to authenticity and human interconnectivity. Mossbridge has a doctorate in communication sciences and disorders from Northwestern University, and a master's degree in neuroscience from the University of California, San Francisco. Here we will see Julia try to explain how the qualia that we experience is the fundamental experience itself.
To learn that, well, we can't be sure about this thing that we have called consciousness, but we know that this is here. We know this chair is here. Right. For sure the chair is there. Right. But this consciousness thing, who knows? Right. It's completely backwards in terms of the actual amount of information we have, right? The actual information that we have, really, fundamental piece of information we have is that consciousness exists. Everything else is extrapolated.
Well, then I have an inner experience, but...
Yeah, that's the only piece of information we really have. Everything is extrapolated from that. But I know that we can't claim that consciousness has to be created of physicality, that physicality is somehow primary and we have to get consciousness out of it, because that is backwards. Because the only thing we can for sure know, if we're going to be incredibly rigorous about what we know about the external world, the only thing we can be sure of is consciousness. So that has to be the thing out of which we try to understand everything. If we ever bridge this gap, it will be bridged by understanding that material is consciousness. The only way we will get to a place where people understand the relationship between brain and consciousness is when we acknowledge consciousness as primary, because it demonstrably is, right? The most rigorous scientific test is just to ask, really, what information do I have about the universe? All I have is that I'm conscious. That's all I have. Everything else, I'm inferring, right? So that will always be there. So we have to explain that. So to me, that's what the explanation has to come from, start with consciousness. You can't go the other direction because that doesn't explain the first.
Science itself is a belief or a concept held within the mind. So any claim that you make about what is true or not true is always contextual to the thing that is perceiving or believing that truth. It is always contextual. So when a human being asks what the truth is, the human is asking essentially, what am I in comparison to that? And once you start thinking like that, you start thinking about these abstract concepts of polarity and how these two different things seem to connect to create something. And what she is saying is that something that is being created is the fundamental system itself. It is the ness of all of reality, and it is ununderstandable. And because it is ununderstandable and unknowing, it itself is divine. And all of us experience this divinity every day, every second, and across all time. So let's end the video with a little bit of a thought experiment here, hopefully to crack open some more minds into an experience of Satori. If we have two computers, and one computer is running Skyrim, the video game, and another computer is the exact same model of computer and everything. It's made from the same factory line. And this other computer is running Microsoft Excel. Now you can see by looking at the screens of these computers, the display monitors, that one is running Skyrim and one is running Excel. But if I were to unplug these monitors completely, and to unplug the speakers, and then allow somebody externally to enter the room and look at both of the computers and look at them running, could they tell me which one is running Skyrim and which one is running Microsoft Excel? Perhaps they could, but they could not tell me that it was running Skyrim. They could not tell me that it was running Excel. All they could tell me is that the computer system was running a program. And this program within the computer becomes fundamentally part of its meaning. And this is an example of how we run around existing as these systems, but the very experience that we have, everything that interconnects with us, becomes part of our personal meaning, and this meaning is unfathomable. It is undescribable. It is only describable in the context of another system, and this fundamentally is how everything in the universe is. So before we get all doom and gloom and throw out ideas of free will and throw out meaning and talk about how this universe is nothing but a big mess that doesn't care about me or you, we've got to sit down and talk about the context. And that context is the fact that you and I exist at all. This is Nick Newman with the Conscienticon. If you like this content, please comment, like, and subscribe. And I would like to stop and thank the patrons for supporting the Conscienticon. I thank you guys so very deeply. And I'm so happy that you're still here with me on this very big journey. As the channel starts to continue to expand and get a little crazy, I'm so happy to be here and have you guys on that journey with me. And if you'd like to become a patron yourself, the first $103 tier patrons will get a video posted on the Conscienticon on any topic that they wish me to discuss, and I will post it eternally. I will never take that video down, no matter how cringy it may get or no matter how different I become. I will leave that video in your honor always. So this is Nick Newman with the Conscienticon.